Hello, I'm DelusionDispeller. Today I'm going to talk to you about why it was not your fault. The abuse, the narcissistic torment, all the things that you went through, why it was not your fault. Chances are the abuse that you went through happened when you were a child. Now, children don't ask to be born. Children don't ask to be put in abusive situations or with parents who are abusive. So naturally, there's the logical reason why it wasn't your fault, simply because you were a child, and children don't have the ability to make adult choices. Now let's talk about what it was like being abused, the different ways that you were abused by a child, and what makes it not your fault, all the abuse and the narcissistic things that happened to you. In a household with a narcissistic adult, I won't even call them parents because they are not worthy of being called such a thing. In a narcissistic situation, the child is expected to absorb the narcissistic projections of the adult. In other words, often the adult will blame the child for things that they should not be blamed for, things that are the adult's responsibility. For instance, if there was a meeting that the adult was supposed to attend, they'll say, well, I need you to remind me about that meeting. And if the child forgets to remind them, then all hell breaks loose. Rather than the adult writing it down on their day minder or whatever and being responsible, they will choose to blame the child. Sometimes they'll blame the children for things that a child shouldn't even be expected to know how to do. The child in a narcissistic situation is not allowed to call the narcissistic adult on any type of inconsistency of behavior that they see. The child must always be one step ahead and anticipate the narcissist's needs without them telling them what they need. In fact, that's often what you'll hear from a narcissistic adult's mouth is, you should have known I liked it that way. You should have known what I wanted. I shouldn't have to tell you. Well, yes, you should. If I don't know what you want as a child, then you need to tell me what you want. And it must be within reason and up to my ability and standard of being able to give you that as a child, not something expected of an adult that is put upon a child. That's not right, it's not fair, and it's abuse. Another reason why it was not your fault as a child, what you've been through. Children must always adore and give attention to, primary attention, to the narcissistic adult. I have heard cases where a narcissistic adult actually would take over a child's birthday party and make it all about them. They would go to a child's award night and somehow do something to get all eyes on them and sit there and tell stories about how wonderful they are to get eyes off of the child and the proper congratulations that that child should be getting. Very common in narcissistic households. The narcissistic adult will make everything all about them, no matter what it is. Especially if they're histrionic. This is very, very common with histrionic people. A narcissist will claim that any abuse that happens to the child is for their own good. The child must always remain inferior to the narcissistic adult. If the narcissistic adult wants the child to change their hair, their clothes, whatever, that child is expected to change that as many times as necessary to please the narcissistic adult, which of course the narcissist is never pleased. So the child usually ends up running to their room in tears, wondering what they could have done differently to please the adult. If a narcissistic adult expects a child to do something, especially like if they expect them to act adult in public, don't cry, act like a big girl, act like a big boy, we don't want to embarrass ourselves, then that child is expected to comply. And a child cannot be perfect, they can only be a child. Even adults are not perfect, but especially when this is put upon a child, that you cannot cry in public. You cannot let them see that I upset you. You can't let them see what's going on behind closed doors. This puts a very bad amount of pressure upon the poor little child. which is, again, why it is not your fault, the abuse that happened, the narcissism that happened in your life. Let's stay tuned for the next video where I will talk a little bit more on this topic. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be right back.